Are these inquiries a waste of time, or are they necessary mechanisms to rid us of political ills? Well, to help us make sense of this, I'm joined by Corruption Watch's David Lewis and UJ Politics Professor, and that's Professor Gwandiwe Kondlo. And also joining us from our Cape Town studios is a constitutional law expert, that's Phepelapi Dube. Thank you to all three of you for making the time. David Lewis, I'm going to start with you. The importance of these inquiries when they are instituted and investigating whatever it is that they're meant to investigate, that can't be overemphasized as to why they're important. The question that lingers thereafter, though, is who is held accountable? Do they answer this question?
Yeah, well, you know, I think that a commission of inquiry has to be separated from a criminal trial. And it's not a criminal trial, and it should not be expected to produce the outcomes that criminal trials are expected to produce. But it can certainly generate evidence which will create great pressure and great reason for conducting criminal trials, although I have to say that everything that's been heard before the Zondo Commission to date has been known about for quite a long time. I mean, there's been some interesting news stuff in Agreezy's testimony, but it has been known for a long time. I think that commissions of inquiry should be asking, and particularly these that are set up now, they should be asking what happened, how it happened, and how do we prevent it from happening again in the future? I think those would be the valuable answers from all of these commissions of inquiries.
What about recommendations, though, David Lewis? Are those implemented to the T?
Yeah, no, I mean, there certainly should be recommendations, and the recommendations may be policy recommendations, which I think are very important, recommendations to change statutes, to institute new statutes, and there should be recommendations for prosecution. But, you know, as I say, in much of this matter, the NPA and the Hawks should have been filing prosecutions long before the Zondo Commission was even set up.
Professor Gwandiwe Kondlo, let's bring you in.
Yes.
At a political level, there's always this cynical view that these commissions are merely instituted to pacify an angry citizenship about a particular matter. Is that view fair?
Yes, Claudia, that is one view. That is one view. But the other view, which is also important to consider, is that these commissions of inquiry are important because states or governments at one point will face legitimacy challenges. And to deal with such challenges, issues that dent the legitimacy of the state, the authority of the state, like corruption, will need to be investigated through a commission of inquiry. This is not a uniquely South African issue. This is not a South African tendency. I can take you as far back as 1966 in Ghana after Kwame Nkrumah was deposed. 1966 to 1972, Ghana had 40 commissions of inquiry into corruption. You see? Let's go to Niger in 1976. How many commissions of inquiry were set after regime change in Niger? Come to Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone in 1992, they had 3 commissions of inquiry going. So this is not a uniquely South African phenomenon. We see it happening all over the African continent and also in other parts of the world.
Let's bring in Phepelapi Dube, the constitutional law expert from Cape Town now. Phepelapi, David Lewis says an interesting point here. In fact, it's actually a well-known view that these commissions are not courts of law, and therefore whatever it is that they recommend, it may be policy recommendations or what have you. The important question, I think, that is there for the public to see is who ultimately gets accountable or gets held accountable. Do citizens, and are they justified in demanding that someone gets held accountable after so much monies get wasted on these commissions?
Well, absolutely. That view for accountability, or that call for accountability, is a justified call. I think especially if you consider the revelations that have been coming out of the Zondo Commission, you know, the fact that the Hawks, as far as 2010, had a docket which had details of all of these allegations of wrongdoing, but nothing came out of it. And also, obviously, the bombshell allegations to the fact that the Deputy Director of the National Prosecuting Authority, or rather the two directors, appeared to have been in the pay of Bosasa. So I think all of these allegations that have been coming out of these commissions only serve to ensure that, or really only serve to I think the ultimate goal that comes out of these commissions of inquiry is really to emphasize the need for accountability. And I think, as David Lewis has already pointed out, the work of the Commission is not done. It also depends on the proper functioning of other institutions of state to ensure that there is proper accountability. But I think a second point that I would like to explore further is really the mechanism, the legislative framework that governs commissions of inquiry, in the sense that we're looking at an act that dates back to 1947. So it's an act that predates the Constitution. So in a sense, it's very much an act, a piece of legislation which is governed towards ensuring executive power. So it's not a piece of legislation which is in sync with the public interest, or indeed in sync with the demand for constitutional democracy. So in that sense, if we were to have an overhaul of the legislative framework to ensure that the judges that are manning these commissions are given greater powers, then perhaps that could be the beginnings of ensuring that there is a proper sense of accountability that arises out of these commissions. But of course, it's not up to the commission alone. It's also up to other institutions of state to also come to the party.
David Lewis, Pepe Lapi makes an interesting point that the judges who head these commissions are given proper powers. But the argument would be that these people, they get given powers to subpoena witnesses who may possibly want to refuse to come and give evidence if they are so implicated. The problem here is who gets accountable, held accountable at the end of the day, David. And I want to actually focus the attention on a living example, and that is the Marikana inquiry. Who has gone to jail, apart from people just resigning and being allowed to resign, by the way?
Yeah, no, the answer is nobody, and you know that bears out the point just made that other institutions of state have to do that. The Commission of Inquiry does not have the power to send people to jail, and in fact its recommendations are not even binding. It's entirely up to the President who appointed them to institute to implement the recommendations or not. But it can create great public pressure for those other institutions to act, and this is what is happening at the moment, and I can hear it in your voice, in fact. This is precisely what is happening at the moment, and that's all to the good. You know, I think on the question of the powers of a Commission of Inquiry, I think they do have considerable powers. It depends on how the presiding officer exercises those powers. You know, I think the legal term is that a Commission of Inquiry is an inquisitorial process, where, in other words, the presiding officer, the commissioner, is entitled to inquire beyond that is merely presented to him or her. In a court proceeding, the judge sits and listens to two contesting parties, and he is limited by the four corners of what is before him or her. There's no further inquiry that the judge institutes. It's up to the contending parties to bring evidence before him. A judge heading a Commission of Inquiry, or anybody heading a Commission of Inquiry, is not only entitled but required to go beyond the evidence that he's heard. We are reviewing, for example, the outcome of the Sariti Commission of Inquiry, because we believe that the judge...
That was whitewash?
That's your opinion. I happen to share it. But what is clear is that the judge did not exercise his powers to inquire. He simply sat there and listened to the evidence that was submitted to him, and then didn't particularly treat those who submitted the evidence very fairly, but that's another question. The question is that an inquiry is precisely what it is. It is inquisitorial. You go and inquire. You don't simply wait to hear what is submitted to you.
So, Professor Kondlo, it would appear then that the fault rests squarely with the prosecuting authority. You already heard Pepe Lapi referring to the two people who have been implicated, if you like, in the ongoing Commission of Inquiry into state capture. These are Nomgcobo Jiba and Lawrence Mkhwebi, as far as reports go, that they allegedly accepted bribes. Is that institution being turned around? And Shamila Batoy is on her way to South Africa from the International Criminal Court. Should the public have confidence again in the NPA?
Yes, clearly. I think Ms. Dube was correct when she says, look, we really need to look seriously at our legislative framework, at our legal framework. And with the NPA, I think it's going to take a bit of time to turn it around. Shamila Batoy, we're all expecting a lot from her. But of course, the support she's going to get from the NPA team and from the criminal justice cluster is going to be very important. There's a lot which has been happening in South Africa. And with the Zondo Commission of Inquiry, the biggest task, which is actually going to be a challenge of the courts of law of the NPA, is testing the veracity of the evidence which has been brought before this commission. You see, there's a lot of material, for instance, brought by Mr. Agrizi. How do we verify some of these documents? And that could take a bit of time. So I'm trying to say, with all what we see happening in South Africa, no miracle is going to happen. Yes, it's going to take quite a bit of time to do all what needs to be done in a very careful and procedural way.
Pepe Lapi Dube, perhaps you'll have the last word here. Should the public still have confidence when they watch this morning reports that suggest that the NPA is again withdrawing charges provisionally against people like Duduzane Zuma on the corruption matter relating to state capture? You've already had the dairy farm case that was also withdrawn by the prosecuting authority. Are these being done in order to do proper investigations so that the prosecution goes to court, as we often hear them say, that they want to go to court with a winnable case?
Well, I think the public should be concerned with the latest developments regarding the National Prosecuting Authority, just bearing in mind that a long-running accusation against the National Prosecuting Authority had been the fact that the body had become politicized and that the body was incapable of acting where individuals who were politically connected were linked. And I think the latest developments certainly lend a form of credence to that kind of perception. But I think on the other hand, we need to bear in mind that Shamila Batoy is coming into office, and in a sense, it's really about a new dispensation that's taking over the National Prosecuting Authority. And I think if we also consider exactly how she came into the office, the fact that it was really the first time where we had these interviews held out in the public. So I think all of these factors, in a sense, speak to, a renewed sense of political will in the proper functioning of the National Prosecuting Authority. But I think ultimately the bigger question rests with her ability to meet all of these pressing demands and to ultimately satisfy, the public interest.
All right. Thank you very much for those insights. All three of you, of course. David Lewis from Corruption Watch, thank you very much for having made the time. Professor Kwandiwe Kondlo, a UJ politics professor, thank you indeed for having come through. And of course, Pepe Lapi Dube as well in Cape Town. Thanks for your time.